Look into that lens right now and tell me you didn't see this coming. Because while the mainstream media was busy distraction feeding you generic headlines about royal balcony appearances, and who's wearing what to the latest polo match, a ticking legal time bomb just detonated inside a U.S. federal courthouse. And the shock waves? They just blew the windows straight out of Buckingham Palace. King Charles has officially erupted. I'm not talking about a polite, British, passive-aggressive sigh over afternoon tea. I am talking about an absolute scorched-earth royal meltdown behind closed doors. Why? Because of a highly classified, heavily redacted federal court ruling that slipped through the cracks while you were sleeping. A document that Harry's high-priced California legal team desperately prayed would remain buried forever. They thought they pulled off the ultimate escape. They thought the paperwork was hidden, the deadlines were safely missed, and the tracks were totally covered. They were wrong. Tonight, we are cutting through the PR spin, the late-night talk show fluff, and the weaponized victimhood to bring you the cold, hard, unredacted receipts. We are talking about a catastrophic intersection of a high-stakes federal visa fraud investigation, an 85% bleeding charity empire, and a secret pact that just shattered. Did the Duke of Sussex commit a federal crime on paper, or did the government grant a shadow privilege no ordinary human being could ever dream of obtaining? Grab your popcorn and hold on to your seats, because the 5-year Hollywood experiment just hit a brick wall. And the receipts do not take sides. Let's dive in. The mainstream media wants you to believe that everything is completely normal in Montecito, that the sunshine is bright, the multi-million-dollar deals are flowing, and the royal exile is a resounding success story. But if you actually pull up the federal court dockets in Washington, if you look at the IRS filings that came in through the back door, and if you read the actual transcripts from the UK Court of Appeal, you quickly realize that the entire Sussex empire is built on a foundation of absolute sand. We have to start with the origin of this massive legal trap because it all traces back to a single moment of staggering arrogance in January of 2023. When Prince Harry sat down to write his memoir, he thought he was just selling books, settling old scores, and collecting a massive paycheck from his publishers. He didn't realize he was handing a loaded weapon to federal prosecutors and immigration authorities. In that book, he didn't just hint at an edgy lifestyle. He meticulously documented, with specific dates, locations, and personal anecdotes, his extensive history with classic controlled substances. He admitted to using cocaine, he admitted to using cannabis, and he explicitly described tripping on psychedelic mushrooms while staying at a celebrity party in California. Now, to a Hollywood publicist, that sounds like a raw, honest, and relatable celebrity confession designed to top the bestseller lists. But to the United States Department of Homeland Security, that is a flat-out confession to violations of federal law. Under Section 212 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, any foreign national who formally admits to a history of drug use or controlled substance violations is automatically ruled inadmissible to the United States. There is no gray area. There is no special loophole for celebrities, and there is certainly no clause that says the rules don't apply if your grandmother was the Queen of England. When any normal citizen from Canada, the UK, Australia, or anywhere else on Earth applies for a US visa, they are forced to confront a very direct, terrifyingly clear question on the form regarding past substance abuse and criminal conduct. If an ordinary traveler answers yes to that question, their visa application is instantly thrown into the rejection pile, and they are banned from entering the country unless they go through an incredibly rigorous, multi-year process to obtain an extraordinarily rare internal waiver. If that same ordinary traveler answers no to that question, despite having a massive, publicly documented history of drug use, they have committed an entirely separate federal crime known as willful misrepresentation. That is a fraudulent application to the federal government, and under U.S. law, it triggers a mandatory, permanent lifetime ban from ever crossing the border again. This is the exact legal corner that Harry has painted himself into, and there is absolutely no third option. He either checked the box saying yes and received a highly irregular, politically motivated waiver that bypassed standard immigration protocols, or he checked the box saying no and signed his name to a fraudulent federal document. This is exactly why the Heritage Foundation, a powerful Washington think tank, stepped in and filed a massive Freedom of Information Act lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security. They demanded that the government open up the vault and show the public the exact visa application that was submitted when Harry moved to California. For over 2 years, the government's legal team fought tooth and nail to keep that file completely sealed, arguing that a royal prince has a supreme right to privacy that outweighs the public's right to know if federal laws are being applied fairly. But behind closed doors, a senior federal judge finally looked at the paperwork and realized the government's excuses were completely crumbling. The court issued a quiet but devastating ruling demanding that the redacted logs be handed over, and what those logs revealed sent shockwaves all the way back to London. The paperwork showed that senior officials within the Department of Homeland Security were panicking behind the scenes, holding emergency meetings, and missing critical court deadlines in March because they knew that the moment these files are fully unsealed, it will prove the entire immigration system was manipulated for a celebrity elite. The King's legal advisors in London have been tracking this case with absolute horror, because they know that if the court officially rules that the visa was obtained through misrepresentation, the Department of Homeland Security will be legally obligated to initiate deportation proceedings against the King's own son. The sheer panic inside Buckingham Palace has reached a boiling point because Charles understands that this isn't a tabloid story about family drama anymore. It is a full-blown international diplomatic disaster with a hard court date attached. And while Harry's legal team is frantically trying to figure out how to stop the unsealing of that visa file, his financial empire in America is suffering an even more spectacular, multi-million-dollar collapse that his publicists cannot hide anymore. For years, the Sussex narrative has been that they walked away from the royal family to build a self-sufficient, globally impactful humanitarian movement through their flagship organization, Archewell Philanthropies. They told the world that they were going to uplift communities, change minds, and fund major global initiatives. But the newly published federal tax returns, specifically the IRS Form 990 filings, show an entirely different reality that reads like a financial horror story. In 2021, when the hype was at its peak and the Netflix money was flowing, Archewell reported a staggering $13 million in public and corporate contributions. A year later, that number crashed down to $2 million. And the latest filings reveal that the foundation's total fundraising has completely plateaued at just $2.1 million. That represents an absolutely catastrophic 85% drop in donations in less than 3 years. The general public, the corporate sponsors, and the wealthy philanthropists who initially wanted to align themselves with the royal brand have completely stopped writing checks. But the data inside that tax form gets infinitely worse when you look at where that remaining $2.1 million actually came from. The filing reveals that a staggering $2 million out of that total was contributed by one single, anonymous mystery individual writing a massive check to keep the lights on. That means the entire global Sussex brand, with all its talk shows, podcasts, and media appearances, managed to raise a pathetic $100,000 from the rest of the world combined. This isn't a global humanitarian movement. It is a private vanity project funded by the checkbook of a single, undisclosed multi-millionaire fan. While the money coming in has slowed down to a trickle, the money going out is flowing like an open wound. The tax returns show that Archewell spent over $5.1 million in administrative, promotional, and operational costs in a single year. When you are bringing in $2.1 million and spending $5.1 million, you are running a massive $2.5 million annual deficit. They are burning through their cash reserves at such an alarming rate that financial experts calculate the foundation has a maximum runway of about 3 years before the accounts hit zero, and the entire entity goes completely bankrupt. The financial strain has become so intense that behind the scenes, 3 senior employees were quietly laid off, and the entire organization had to be hastily rebranded from the Archewell Foundation to Archewell Philanthropies in a desperate attempt to make a catastrophic math problem look like a strategic corporate evolution. If any small-town charity or local non-profit ran these kinds of numbers, the regulators would be circling, the board of directors would be resigning in mass panic, and the donors would be demanding a full forensic audit. But because the founders are Hollywood royalty, the mainstream media continues to pretend that this is a completely normal way to run a philanthropic enterprise. The truth is that the elite watchdogs are no longer staying silent, and the pressure on the charity's hidden books has reached a level of unprecedented scrutiny that is about to expose the entire operation to the public. The American Independent Charity Rating System is famously brutal, and the top organization in the country, Charity Watch, has been quietly conducting its own investigation into the strange financial discrepancies happening behind the closed doors of the Sussex headquarters in California. For years, Harry and Meghan have stood in front of cameras at gala events, accepting awards for their humanitarian work, and lecturing the public about the absolute necessity of institutional transparency, corporate accountability, and ethical leadership. In plain, unvarnished legal English, the highest court in the United Kingdom informed the royal exile that when an individual actively chooses to resign from his job as a working representative of the sovereign state, packs his suitcases, and migrates to a foreign country to secure lucrative commercial media deals with private entertainment networks, his access to state-funded security changes as a matter of standard domestic policy, not personal punishment. The judicial panel acknowledged that Harry felt a deep, intense, subjective sense of grievance regarding his loss of status, but then they delivered the ultimate legal knockout blow, stating explicitly that a personal sense of grievance does not translate into a valid legal argument. The court was entirely unmoved by media talking points or emotional scripts. Harry lost the court case, he lost his subsequent applications to appeal the decision, and he was hit with a massive financial penalty, ordered to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars back to the state to cover the legal bills of the government he had attempted to bully. The senior judges wrote into the permanent legal record that the prince was attempting to demand a highly irregular, unprecedented legal framework where he could step in and out of the cohort of state protection whenever it suited his private commercial calendar. The court told him in no uncertain terms that he had chosen to walk out of the royal household, and now he was wasting millions of dollars attempting to sue the door for closing behind him. This absolute legal humiliation left Harry completely exposed on the global stage, because while his legal campaigns were crashing into a brick wall in London, the primary moral shield he has used for over a decade to salvage his public reputation was beginning to suffer a spectacular, multi-million-dollar internal collapse under a sudden avalanche of corporate desertion and government funding cancellations. That moral shield is the Invictus Games, the international adaptive sporting event for wounded, injured, and sick military veterans that Harry established during his peak years as a working royal. For more than a decade, this foundation has been the single untouchable, universally praised asset in his portfolio. Whenever investigative journalists pointed out that he was generating immense wealth by selling his family's private history to streaming platforms, his public relations apparatus would instantly pivot the conversation toward his tireless advocacy for wounded warriors to silence the public backlash. But as the internal mechanics of the foundation began to leak out, the corporate world staged a silent, massive exodus that has threatened to trigger a total institutional insolvency before the next stadium gates can even open. The first major corporate pillar to collapse was Boeing, the aerospace and defense powerhouse that had previously served as the premier, presenting sponsor of the international event. Boeing's financial muscle had effectively carried the weight of the entire marketing machine during the previous games, pouring millions into the infrastructure. Their sudden decision to completely walk away from the upcoming Birmingham Games was executed with chilling corporate precision. No public drama, no explanatory press conferences, just a silent removal of their corporate logo from the official stationery. Simultaneously, a second devastating financial missile struck the foundation from the Southern Hemisphere, where the Australian federal government handed down its new budget allocations. Independent financial analysts reviewing the line items discovered that the state had completely axed its $9 million financial commitment to Invictus Australia, erasing the funding from the national ledger with a single stroke of a pen. To make matters infinitely more alarming for the survival of the charity, the long-standing vice chairman of the Invictus Games Foundation board abruptly resigned from his post, packing his executive office and exiting the organization without offering a single word of explanation or support to the media. The host city for the upcoming competition, Birmingham, is itself a verified financial disaster zone, having only recently managed to emerge from a historic municipal bankruptcy that left the local government with a crushing $87 million deficit. The baseline budget required to successfully stage and operate the upcoming international event in Birmingham is calculated at a minimum of $45 million. Yet, according to verified internal documents, the foundation has only managed to secure a meager $4 million in confirmed private sponsorships from a handful of small, entirely anonymous entities, that leaves the Duke of Sussex staring directly into a massive, terrifying $41 million financial black hole with the clock ticking rapidly toward the opening ceremonies. The corporate world is running away because they have finally started analyzing the jaw-dropping internal mathematics of how these charitable funds are actually being allocated under Harry's personal leadership, and the numbers are completely indefensible to any serious corporate board. When you look closely at the official financial disclosures from the previous games held in Vancouver, The spending structure reads less like a lean charity for wounded heroes and more like a lavish, unrestricted Hollywood production budget. The total cost to operate the Vancouver event reached an astronomical $63.2 million. When you divide that total cost by the actual number of wounded veterans who were brought in to participate, you discover that the foundation spent a mind-boggling $118,000 per individual competitor. To put that into perspective, the United States Warrior Games, which provides elite athletic competition, medical rehabilitation, and global staging for wounded American military veterans, runs its entire nationwide operation for the whole year on a total budget of just $2 million. The domestic German version of the Veteran Games operates efficiently on less than $200,000. This means that the accounting line for a single solitary competitor at Harry's event equals more than half a year of the entire United States military veteran sports infrastructure. This staggering discrepancy is exactly what caught the attention of veteran investigative journalists, who began publishing highly detailed, uncompromised allegations stating that massive chunks of these international charity funds were being systematically drained away from the front-line veterans to finance private luxury travel, global private jet charters, top-tier 5-star hotel suites, and massive personal security details for the Sussexes personally whenever they travel to look at the Games, establishing a pattern of luxury expenditure that the foundation has never once denied. The institutional silence from the Invictus executive offices regarding these severe financial allegations has left the global veteran community completely disillusioned. They have refused to answer a single press inquiry. They have ignored formal requests for clarification from international news networks, and they have bunker-hidden their remaining administrative staff from the glare of public scrutiny. The real tragedy of this financial tailspin doesn't belong to the wealthy princes or the high-priced public relations consultants living in coastal California mansions. It belongs entirely to a group of people who haven't been mentioned a single time throughout this entire sordid corporate saga. We are talking about the ordinary, non-famous, physically broken and psychologically recovering men and women who gave their limbs, their mental health, and their youth fighting on the front lines of global conflicts. These individuals were brought into this movement on a solemn, binding promise that they would be given a dignified global stage to heal, a moment where their sacrifices would be honored, and an organization that would protect their legacy. Instead, the foundation that utilized their faces for years to build a commercial media brand is now sitting on a bankrupt $41 million hole. Its premier corporate partners are fleeing the building, the vice chairmen are deserting the board, and the founders are completely distracted fighting personal immigration lawsuits in distant federal courts. The ordinary veterans don't have a multi-million-dollar streaming deal to air their grievances, they don't have high-end public relations firms to spin the media narrative, and they are left watching their flagship foundation collapse around them while Prince Harry attempts to utilize the ultimate, desperate public relations diversion strategy to save his public image, in a move that stunned royal observers, while his charity was actively hiding its audits from American watchdogs, while Boeing was abandoning his sponsorship boards, and while the United States federal courts were preparing to force open his immigration file, Harry hopped on a private aircraft, flew directly into an active foreign conflict zone, and sat down for a highly staged television interview. Standing in front of the cameras, he looked into the lens and delivered a line that was so completely disconnected from his actual legal reality, it left commentators speechless. He officially stated to the public that he will always be a part of the royal family and that he was simply working and doing the exact thing he was born to do. The sheer audacity of that statement is breathtaking. He is attempting to use an active international conflict and the suffering of wartime veterans as a tactical moral cover to remind the global public of his royal birthright, all while the actual domestic foundations of his California lifestyle are actively burning to the ground behind the scenes. It is a desperate public relations stunt designed to make him look like a selfless global statesman, but when you lay out the actual legal and financial receipts side by side, the illusion completely vanishes, and you are left looking at a systematic commercial and legal collapse that has now reached the absolute point of no return. If you add up the cold, hard data that the Sussex camp has spent 5 years trying to bury, the total fallout is completely undeniable. First, Archewell Philanthropies has spent significantly more money than it has raised every single consecutive year since 2022, proving that their business model is entirely unsustainable. Their net remaining assets have dwindled down to a precarious $8.3 million, which means that at their current massive burn rate of spending, the foundation faces complete financial extinction within 36 months. Second, their global donor base has suffered a total historic 85% collapse, proving that the wider public has completely stopped buying into the moral authority of the Sussex brand. Third, the American watchdogs have officially flagged them for a total lack of financial transparency after 2 years of ignored audit requests, effectively shutting down their ability to raise funds from elite philanthropic networks. Fourth, the British legal system has completely stripped away their claims to royal entitlement, ruling that they are ordinary private citizens who must pay for their own choices out of their own private pockets. And fifth, the premier corporate sponsors of the world are actively running away from their flagship charity because the internal math simply does not add up anymore. This is not a story about a family feud. It is not a case of a prince being persecuted by his relatives, and it is certainly not a temporary rough patch in a Hollywood career. This is the final documented collapse of a multi-million-dollar commercial asset that tried to sell victimhood to the public while operating behind a wall of absolute financial secrecy. Back in the corridors of London, King Charles isn't waiting for the American federal courts to finish the job or for the charities to run completely dry. The Crown Estate has quietly moved past the phase of diplomatic patience and has entered the phase of total physical erasure. Reliable reports emerging from Windsor confirm that commercial contractors have been sent into Frogmore Cottage with explicit instructions to strip out every single fixture, custom fitting, and high-end design choice that Harry and Meghan installed during their initial £2.4 million renovation. This isn't a standard landlord preparing a historic property for a new royal tenant. This is a systematic removal of a physical footprint. The palace is actively erasing any evidence that the Sussexes ever held a permanent stake on the royal estate. When Harry stood inside the walls of Frogmore in January of 2020 and typed out his famous Declaration of Financial Independence, he was living entirely rent-free in a luxury structure paid for by the hard-earned money of the British taxpayer. He only managed to settle that debt 8 months later after signing a massive commercial deal with a streaming platform, a deal he only secured by selling out the private conversations and historical secrets of the very family that is now dismantling his house block by block. The audacity was the core strategy, but the legal and financial receipts have finally caught up with the narrative. Every single line of this multi-continental collapse is heavily documented in public records that cannot be spun by Hollywood publicists. The Court of Appeal citation stands in the British archives. The plummeting numbers are signed under penalty of perjury on the IRS tax returns. The federal court docket in Washington continues to track every single missed deadline by the Department of Homeland Security. The 5-year California experiment is no longer an entertaining media feud. It is a rapidly depreciating commercial asset facing a terminal federal immigration crisis. They wanted the world to look at the glamour, the red carpets, and the inspirational speeches, but they forgot that a brand built entirely on media optics cannot survive when the legal paperwork turns against it. The strategy of using international charities as a personal shield has completely run out of road because the corporate world operates on metrics, not emotions, and those metrics have exposed an unprecedented level of institutional mismanagement. While Harry's legal squad is frantically trying to figure out how to block the next major judicial disclosure regarding his visa entry logs, the public is finally waking up to the reality that the rules of law apply equally to everyone, regardless of their lineage.